What is up, everybody? JP here, back with another MMA YouTube video. Today we're going to be going over the predictions for this week's fight night: Vettori versus Dolidze, the rematch in the Apex. So let's get straight into it, starting with the first fight of the night. We got Eunice Dubin versus Carly Judas. I don't know if I've ever seen somebody with this little fights in the UFC. She's 3-2. She had 3 KOs to start her career, got into the UFC, and has lost back-to-back split decisions. I'm going to go with Dubin here. 3-2 is just ridiculous. I obviously don't know much about these two fighters. However, I will tell you, Dubin fought on last year's Contender Series, and she got a clean overhand knockout when she was, she might have been quadruple digits plus money there. She was at least plus 700-800. She was a huge underdog. She lands a perfect overhand. Just imagine Josh Emmett hitting Bryce Mitchell, and that's kind of what it was. And the lady she was fighting against just went absolutely limp, stiff, out cold. And if you've seen a screenshot of Dana's reaction to that, I'm sure you have. I'll put it on the screen now. It was so funny, and I saw that live, and it was absolutely insane. So she definitely deserves a contract, but I'm also going to be picking her in her debut as well. Next fight, Joseanne Nunes versus Priscilla Cachoeira. Wow, this could be fight of the year. I'm going to go with Nunes. She actually looks like a man, so Cachoeira's been in the UFC a while. She's getting pretty old. I'm going to go with Mr. Nunes to get the job done here. Here we go. Andre Lima versus Daniel Barez. I'm going to be picking Andre Lima in this fight. I actually watched one of Andre Lima's fights in person at UFC. Was it 302? Makhachev versus Poirier. Some stuff about him. He's a little bit slow to start. He doesn't have the most crazy amount of output, but he's a very technical, cerebral fighter. He's got great vision, sees shots well, good defense. He's just got a high fight IQ, to be honest. You can see that he's well trained and looks very mature in the cage for his age, and that did rhyme. So I'm pretty impressed with Lima. He's a young Brazilian guy, undefeated, and there's a lot of fighters that end up with great careers that are Brazilian and start undefeated in their career. Charles, Anderson Silva, but obviously there's a ton of guys like that, so not all of them can end up like that. But yeah, Andre Lima could be one of them. He just keeps on winning. He's not fighting the best competition yet, but I'm still very impressed the way he fights and how mature he looks in the cage. He's taken on Daniel Barez. This guy isn't great. He doesn't have many fights in the UFC. He's fought once a year for the past 2 or 3 years now. He's coming off a win over Victor Altamirano. Just not very high level in the division. I think he got knocked down in that fight too, and he came back and got the win. So yeah, with all that being said, I'm gonna take Andre Lima to. I think he could land a knockout too. Let's see if he can get one of his first finishes in the UFC. Next fight, Sam Hughes versus Stephanie Luciano. Wow, 9-6. I'm gonna be going with Stephanie Luciano. She's 6-1-1, and she's a Brazilian, so that sounds good enough for me to pick her. To be honest, I haven't done any research on that, John. Next fight, we got Josas Musasa versus Carlos Vera. This guy's a huge favorite. He's fought on the Contender Series before. He's undefeated. He's got a crazy physique, kind of that bodybuilder physique. He doesn't have many fights, similar to Carlos Vera, 15 fights and 8 fights. Carlos Vera's coming off a loss. He's pretty small for the division, not great wins. I haven't done too much research on this fight either way. Musasa is a huge favorite. I'm going to be taking him to get the knockout. Just look at the size of that guy's arms. Next fight in the bantamweight division, we got AJ Cunningham versus Su Young Yu. Another fight with very wide odds. I'm going to pick Soo Young Soo to get the job done. AJ Cunningham hasn't had many fights in the UFC. I think he lost his last fight in the first round KO to Ludovic Klein. That was a really bad, I don't even know if it was a really bad performance, but he got manhandled in that fight, just picked apart on the feet, and eventually KO'd in the first round. I'm pretty sure that fight was on short notice too. Either way, Ludovic Klein is a great prospect and somebody that could be in the rankings in the next year too. So it is what it is for him. I'm going to go Soo Young Yu to get the finish here. Last fight on the prelims. This is where it starts to get a little better. We got Waldo Cortez Acosta versus Ryan Spann. Some things to note. First of all, with Ryan Spann, he's moving up to heavyweight. He's been fighting in the light heavyweight division his whole career. So he moves up to heavyweight and is already getting a ranked opponent in Waldo Cortez Acosta. You may have heard this before, but lighter man's skill is definitely a thing. And basically what that is when a lighter weight class fighter, such as a featherweight, moves up to lightweight, they usually have success. It could be any division, really. They're going to have success because they're a little bit more skillful and they're definitely faster and they're used to fighting other faster opponents. So they'll see the shots better when they're moving up a weight class against slower fighters, you could say. It happened with Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje. You can see so many examples of a featherweight moving to lightweight, just like Charles Oliveira, Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, and those guys all had major success in the lightweight division. We saw this exact same thing with Kennedy Nzechukwu. He's been fighting at light heavyweight for a while. He moves up to heavyweight, and he's already in the rankings. He's 2-0 with 2 first-round KOs, so if I'm going to make a comparison, that's going to be it, and he's definitely having success in the same way, so that's definitely something of note when you're looking at this fight. Another thing with Ryan Spann, he really doesn't fight much. He's been on and off in his career, win, loss, loss. Nothing really crazy. He has fought very good competition. If we go to his resume here, he's 22-10, so he's got double-digit losses. The record is a big difference in this fight, 12-1 versus 22-10. Either way, he's got a bunch more UFC fights than Waldo Cortez Acosta. He started very well, about 4-0 in the UFC, and then he's cooled off since. But like I said, he's fought in very good opponents. Johnny Walker, Anthony Smith, you want to call that a good opponent. He beat Ian Cutelaba and Dominic Reyes, who's looked a lot better. So that Reyes KO in the first round, I know he doesn't have a great chin, but that's still a good win. Nikita Krylov, Bogdan Guskov, and OSP. So that Anthony Smith loss via split decision 2 years ago, that was pretty bad. We know Anthony Smith and how he looks at this point in his career, and how he takes leg kicks or doesn't take leg kicks at all. And Ryan Spann just refused to throw leg kicks in that fight against Anthony Smith. I don't know why some fighters just refuse to take the path of least resistance, and it sometimes feels like they try to take the path of most resistance. Why aren't you throwing leg kicks and throwing damage to your opponent's biggest weak area? I really don't know, and he ends up losing a split decision. So after that fight, he got KO'd by Bogdan Guskov, who's a newcomer in the UFC, has had some good wins under his belt, and is currently ranked in the top 15. So not a terrible loss, but it is a knockout loss. And then he just submitted OSP in the first round. That guy's like 40 years old. I did train with OSP one day at his gym in Knoxville, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, OSP, very old, somehow was coming off a win in that fight, but I think he's probably retired by now. So he's 1-3 in his last 4, and his one win is against a 40-year-old OSP. Talking about Waldo Cortez Acosta, he's got a nice record, 12-1. He was a professional boxer at one point, so he's got that boxing background. He's 5-0 by KO, so he's never been finished, and he's got a nice little record in the UFC. He's 5-1. The one thing I have to bring up here is the competition he's faced. He hasn't really faced anybody all that great. Jared Vanderaa, Chase Sherman, these guys are bottom of the barrel heavyweights, and and the heavyweight division is the worst division in the UFC right now. So that's kind of saying a lot that you're fighting those type of guys. Even though he did win, he didn't get the finish. He only has one finish in the UFC, so that's not really what you want to be seeing out of a heavyweight, is a 50% finish rate. But he KO'd Lucas Bursky. You got Bursky to do the Irish jig, the chicken dance, or whatever you want to call it. That was pretty funny. He's on a 3-0-3 fight win streak, but like I said, the competition, Andrei Arlovsky, another old man, took him to a decision too. And then Robels to Spain, who, I mean, really got fraud checked in a few fights, lost to Austin Lane after that. He just had no grappling whatsoever. So it was a good performance for Robels to Spain for that reason, versus Robels to Spain, because of his striking prowess that he was able to subdue by wrestling against Spain, but he had no wrestling defense whatsoever. So now we're kind of seeing how that performance may not have been as good as we thought it was, because Despain was cut from the UFC recently too. So with all that yapping being said, I'm actually going to go with Span. I don't really want to bet on either guy, but I'm going to trust the lighter man's skill. Waldo Cortez Acosta, like I mentioned, I don't really like to see a 50% finish rate in the heavyweight division. Span has a ton more fights, a ton more experience, and has fought a lot better competition. Even though that loss to Anthony Smith did take place, he's coming off a first-round finish. Hopefully he has some confidence after that, and he can get ranked in the heavyweight division. Next fight, starting the main card, we got Sung Woo Choi versus Kevin Vallejos. This is an easy fight. There's a lot of wide odd fights on this card. Vallejos is a pretty big favorite. I'm going to be going Kevin Vallejos here. This guy's been on the Contender Series twice. The first time, he lost a unanimous decision to Gene Silva. Yep, Gene Silva. He definitely held his own in that fight. He lost 2-1 in that fight. I think he won the first round. I was just watching that back. Then Gene Silva got into Gene Silva mode. He's got a great chin, very, very similar to Ilia Topuria, of all people. Short, stocky, muscular kid. Great boxing, a lot of power, great head movement, walks around the cage, walks his opponent down just like Ilia Topuria. So it's pretty cool to see, and this guy is my number one ranked Contender Series fighter from last year. I have a top 10 list, and this guy is number one, so I'm really excited to see what he does in the UFC. He's taken on Sung Woo Choi. He's 1-4 in his last 5. He's 11-7 total. It seems like he gets hurt or finished in all of his fights. If you haven't seen that Michael Trezano fight where he got finished in the first round, that's the only ever time that I've seen a double knockdown happen at the same time. Both these guys hit each other with a hook, and they both went down at the exact same time. It was absolutely insane to see. So if you haven't seen that, go check that out. This is a pretty easy pick. I'm going to go Vallejos here. Next fight, we got DR Nurgajai versus Brenison Ribeiro. Another wide odd fight on this card. I'm going to go Nurgajai here. Another guy coming off of last year Contender Series. I don't know how many fighters they have coming off the Contender Series last year, but this guy's one of them. This is in the heavyweight division. We got Nurgajai from Kazakhstan. A little bit of fat on his stomach, but nothing crazy. Brenison Ribeiro's definitely got the better physique. He's got the much larger reach. I'll tell you that. To start off with Ribeiro, he's 1-2 in the UFC, and those fights haven't really been impressive at all. He lost to Magomed Gadjiasulov, who has actually recently been cut. That was a pretty boring fight. He just got out wrestled, didn't strike much or didn't land much with his strikes in that fight. And then the Contender Series fight, he won to get him into the UFC. He was a pretty big underdog, if I remember, and he did get the KO, so all credit to him. We know Dana loves to see stuff like that, where underdogs get the knockout on the Contender Series. He'll almost always give that guy a contract if that happens, but to be honest, I don't know if this guy should be in the UFC. Like I said, he's 1-2 in the UFC, and the one win, he beat Kyle Machado, and I remember that was a nasty fight, and not in a good way. Just low level, bad defense, bad cardio. Impossible to really score the fight because it was just all over the place, to be honest. So I'm going to be going Nurgajai here. He's 10-0. He got a KO in the round 2 of his Contender Series fight. I'm going to trust him to get this one done. Next fight, Damon Blackshear versus Cody Gibson. Cody Gibson, not terrible, to be honest. He's 22-10, which isn't a great record. He's coming off last year's The Ultimate Fighter. He's coming off 2 wins in a row, so he's taking care of business. He's finding ways to win. He had that absolute war with Brad Katona, who's won the Ultimate Fighter twice. So he had that absolute war with him. He beat Brian Kelleher 2 fights ago. He's 2-2 in the UFC now. There's nothing really all that great about him, to be honest. He's got a nice frame. He's pretty big for the division, but if we take a look at Damon Blackshear here, this is definitely going to be the pick. Don't be fooled by his 15-7-1 record. Don't be fooled by that record. He's actually has some great wins and some great losses, if you want to call it that. So even though he is 15-7-1, we'll take a look at his resume here. Plus, he's 7 years younger than Cody Gibson. I'm definitely going to go with Blackshear here. We see his debut. He fights Yusuf Zalal. He goes to a draw. I know he didn't win this fight, but we see how good Yusuf Zalal is right now. He's 4-0 in his second UFC stint. He just got into the rankings, beating Calvin Kattar. So a draw against Zalal in your debut is definitely nothing to be mad about. Second fight, he loses a decision to Farid Basharat. This is not Javid Basharat, who just got slept out cold to the canvas versus Ricky Simone. This is Farid. This is his brother. He's a little bit better, still undefeated. As you can see, he's 13-0. I don't know why he's not fighting, but even though he's 0-1-1 so far in the UFC, not bad losses at all. Gets back-to-back finishes in his third and fourth fight. So he's then 2-1-1 in the UFC. He fights Mario Batista, who we see has climbed up the rankings far and is now fighting Chito Vera and could definitely win that fight. So we see him lose a decision there at UFC 292. I remember watching that, and I actually thought that was a robbery. If you guys could go watch that back, I definitely would. It was a pretty fun fight. I had Blackshear actually winning that. So, you know, you could say he beat Mario Batista, and Mario Batista is a ranked guy fighting Chito Vera now. So that's also not a bad loss. You can see the next fight, he got KO'd in 18 seconds. Another, I don't want to say it's a good loss, because that can't be a good loss. He got KO'd in 18 seconds. The back of it has his head bounced off the canvas. So Montel Jackson is a great fighter. I'm very high on him too. He never fights either for some reason, but a lot of his fights get canceled. Either way, Montel Jackson's a great fighter. He just got hit with the 1-2 straight down the pipe, and he got knocked out cold. I keep saying it, but Farid Basharat, Yusuf Zalal, Mario Batista, Montel Jackson, these are not bad losses at all, and only one of those times was a finish. Other than that, he has 3 finishes in the UFC. Cody Stammen's not a bad fighter either, and he gets the first round submission. So I like Damon Blackshear. Don't pay attention to his record. And he's definitely going to beat the pick here versus Cody Gibson. Next fight, another tough contender from last year, Kurt Holobaugh versus Alexander Hernandez. I'm actually going to lean Kurt Holobaugh in the underdog pick here. I think I am. Alexander Hernandez was a pretty hyped up prospect coming into the UFC. If you take a look here, he was 2-0 in the UFC, had only one loss, and that was to a current UFC fighter. He knocked out Beneil Dariush in his debut. Okay. Beats Oliver Albin Mercier, who's actually not a bad fighter, pretty good in PFL. Comes into the Cowboy fight, was talking mad trash, and got absolutely fraud checked in that fight. Cerrone really took that personally. That seems to be the start of his downfall. Francisco Trinaldo, a roided Brazilian, he beats. Loses to Drew Dover by finish. KOs this tomato can. Thiago Moises, kind of a gatekeeper in the top 20, loses to him. So if you can't beat Thiago Moises, I don't know how great you really are. I wouldn't think you'd go too far in the UFC. KO's Mike Breeden, another tomato can. And he's fought some good names. Renato Moicano gets finished. Quarantillo gets finished. Aljo, Damon Jackson. I mean, Damon Jackson really in 2024. Come on. Jim Miller's a decent win, but again, that's how old is Jim Miller in 2023? And then he gets a split decision over Austin Hubbard, who's also part of that tough group from last year. So I'm gonna pick Kurt Holobaugh. I'm not impressed at all by Alexander Hernandez. He was once a hyped up prospect, but now he's going to split decisions. He's losing to fighters that aren't great. Kurt Holobaugh definitely isn't an appealing pick by any means, but he's got a lot more experience. He's got 30 fights. He won the Ultimate Fighter by finish at UFC 292. In his first UFC stint, he went 0-3, but they both lost to Moises. Shane Burgos, Heine Barcelos still looking good versus Peyton Talbot. So he's got a lot more fights under his belt, a little bit better competition. And he's coming off an underdog win over Kaden Krashusti, who won on the Contender Series. And he's fought guys like Elvis Brenner too, so I was a little bit surprised that he was able to come out on top in this fight. I think he's going to use his wrestling and probably get the decision. I don't really see either of these guys getting a finish. It's not that high level, but we're going to take a chance on Holobaugh here. Co-main event, we got Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos versus Chidi Njokuani. We see dos Santos minus 195 here. I'm going to be picking him in this fight, even though he is 38 years old, even though he's got 7 inches less reach than Njokuani, who's got 80, damn near John Jones. Dos Santos is one of the most underrated guys in the whole UFC. He's 25-8-1, so he's got a very nice record. He's 15-1 by KO, 3-2 by submission. So even though he's from Brazil, you'd usually think those guys are better at submissions and grappling. No, this guy's a striker. He gets KOs. And he's got quite an impressive resume in the UFC. You can see here he won 7 in a row after losing his debut to Nicholas Dalby, who's very tough. He's never been finished. He goes to a split there. Beats a crafty vet, Omari Akhmedov. Gets a few decision wins. Max Griffin, another vet. We can see KO'd Sean Strickland there, but that was a nasty spinning kick if I remember correctly. A KO over Sean Strickland, I mean, I don't care at what point in Sean's career that was. That's pretty damn good. So we see he was on that 7-fight win streak there. Li Jingliang KO, not that bad of a loss. Split to Muslim Salikov, he loses that again. Salikov's pretty decent fighter, especially still that he's that old. He's still winning fights, so he beat the one and only Benoit Saint-Denis. I mean, this guy must be the GOAT. Benoit was up a weight class, though, and the fight should have been stopped, but that was one of the worst non-stoppages by a ref I've ever seen. Beats Nurmagomedov by split decision. He definitely does train with Khabib, but he's not at the level of Khabib in Islam. Goes to a draw with Renat Fakhretdinov, who was a hyped up guy at the time near the rankings. Gets 10-8'd in the first round, and then goes on to win the next two. Almost finished Renat too. Pretty good. Fights Randy Brown at 302. I was there live. He put on a pretty good performance. Randy Brown definitely won the fight, but he's hanging in there with the young athletic guys. So also coming off that first round KO over a short notice opponent, but so always good to see him coming off of a finish win as well. He's taking on Chidi Njokuani here, 24-10. He's also 36 years old. He's getting up there in age too, so the age doesn't really scream out to me as much as it usually would for Dos Santos being 38 years old. He's only 2 years older than his opponent. We got Njokuani coming off 2 straight wins. Jared Gooden, Reese McKee, not high-level fighters in the UFC. These guys could be even cut by now. Jared Gooden, not good striking. If you go back to his third to last fight, he got knocked out by Olajaychuk in the first round. If you remember, he hurt Olajaychuk bad in that fight, was pouring on the damage, and Olajaychuk with a crazy comeback, and even got the finish over Njokuani in the first round. You usually don't see comebacks ending in the first round, but you do there. Gets finished by Gregory Rodriguez, split decision loss to Albert Duraev. He had a 4-fight win streak, full of knockouts, starting in LFA, then the Contender Series, then his first 2 UFC fights. Marc-Andre Barriol, not a bad KO, 16 seconds. I mean, some pretty good finishes on this resume. 34 fights, so he's got a lot of experience, but not as much experience of his opponent, so I'm going to be going with Dos Santos here to get the job done. He's a more experienced guy. He's definitely got a better resume, fought the much better competition. And I think he could knock out Chidi Njokuani. I know he's 38. Usually you don't see finishes from 38-year-olds unless it's Blachowicz, DC, Alex Pereira, guys like that. This is the welterweight division, but he's definitely still been holding his own even at this age. So I think there's a reasoning for this minus 200 line for Dos Santos. So I'm going to be picking him here. Then we get to the main event. Holy crap, this card is so buns. I don't know if you could make a worse top 10 ranked fight in the UFC right now, guys. This is pretty bad. This whole card is pretty bad. Yeah. Either way, we got Vettori rematching Roman Dolidze. We see the line at minus 150 right now, so pretty damn close. These guys already fought on UFC 286, and Vettori did win that by unanimous decision, 229-28 and a 30-27. And the fight was pretty much all on the feet. Vettori outstruck him pretty handedly, and it was a clear win for Vettori. I'm going to be picking Marvin Vettori in this fight. The reason why is he's just a better overall fighter than Roman Dolidze. There's not many things that Roman Dolidze does better than Marvin Vettori besides his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Marvin Vettori's got the better striking, the better output, certainly, the better chin, the better wrestling. He took down Israel Adesanya. Even though that was a while ago, he has incorporated his wrestling against some good opponents. And he's got a lot better competition. Marvin Vettori has a low-key underrated resume. You can't get a finish to save his life, but at this point, that's kind of common in the UFC with good fighters now. Look at Bilal, Evloev, Merab. These guys can't get finishes, but I mean, the sport is evolving to where you're trying to win on the scorecards and in the safest way possible a lot of this time. Had a cheeky little 5-fight win streak. Jack Hermanson, Kevin Holland. I mean, these are pretty nice names. Paulo Costa, Roman Dolidze, as I just mentioned. He's definitely capable of being in the rankings. He should be in the rankings. And he's still top 10 right now. He's coming off of a long layoff, almost 2 years since his last fight versus Jared Cannonier, where Cannonier put on a significant strike record for the middleweight division. Vettori absorbed 241 strikes. That would probably be the reasoning for him being out for 2 years. That's not what you want to see. Either way, he loses to Cannonier. Like I said, he beat Vettori, or he beat Dolidze. He lost to Robert Whittaker pretty dominantly. He outstruck Paulo Costa. I mean, that was pretty surprising if you ask me. Fights Israel Adesanya. Definitely lost, but I mean, he went to a distance. Beats Kevin Holland, beats Jack Hermanson. Like I said before, great names in this division that you really can't look past when you're breaking down this fight. And then even early on in his UFC career, he goes to a split decision with Israel Adesanya. I know that was a long time ago, but that's obviously looks a lot better now, considering Izzy's one of the top middleweights of all time. If we're looking at Roman Dolidze, he's definitely a Chad. He's got high testosterone, I can tell you that, but he's got some knockout power. He's got 8 finishes, 3 subs. Like, he's an underrated finisher, even though what do we got? 3 fights in a row that did go the distance. He got a KO over Kevin Holland in his last fight. He's on a 2-fight win streak. Honestly, even if you're beating Anthony Smith, how much credit am I going to give you? You should be finishing Anthony Smith at this point in his career, and he only went to a decision. It was definitely a fight that Dolidze won, but by no means was it very impressive. Smith just accepted bottom position and got grounded, pounded. Dolidze really didn't have to do much. Smith really didn't even try to get out of these positions. He's got some nice wins. Knocked out Jack Hermanson on the ground, had him in a calf slicer, could not get up. Pretty cool to see. KO'd Phil Hawes, joined the club. KO'd Kyle Dawkins, not a bad win at the time either. He's got a nice record. He's 14-3, 11-0 by finish, but the Kevin Holland fight, Kevin Holland broke his rib. It was basically an injury KO, but I would give Roman Dolidze the credit. It's not like he tore his ACL and not even on contact. It was on the ground, and he did force Kevin Holland to get injured, so I will give him the credit, but it definitely wasn't like you see here, first round KO. You think, oh, that's pretty good. Kevin Holland's a nice striker too. No, that was on the ground, and it was an injury. So, like I said, there's not a lot to be excited about with Dolidze. He's got very nice BJJ, will always attack you even from the ground, but he's got good power. The striking isn't good. Vettori's got better striking. He's got great cardio, better chin. And the thing with Dolidze is he's just good enough to be ranked. I don't think he's good enough to be in the top 10, at least not for long. But he's just good enough to be ranked. He's just good enough to beat the guys outside the rankings and stay in the top 15. But I don't see this guy getting near a title shot, and he's getting up there in age. Vettori is still young at 31, so that's pretty surprising. I'm going to go with Marvin Vettori here to get we just saw Fiziev and Gaethje, which is pretty crazy to think is they just rematched, and this first fight between Vettori and Dolidze was also on that same card where Gaethje and Fiziev fought their first fight, and now these guys are rematching as well. And just like the Gaethje-Fiziev fight, I think it's going to be very similar to the first fight. Vettori's going to get this on the cards, so that's my opinion on that. That'll be it for this week's Fight Night, Vettori versus Dolidze 2. If you liked the video, please drop a like and subscribe if you're new. Breesh.